Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Devotions. Pastor Steve here walking with you in God's Word. We're in Genesis chapter 11. And just a little quirky thing in the book of Genesis is Genesis chapter 11 is not chronological to Genesis chapter 10. And so a lot of times when we read saying, right, the creation and the fall and then Cain and Abel, and then we get to see the flood and then we've been in that narrative, and then we get to see the descendants of Noah and being able to carve that out. And then we come to the Tower of Babel. And the reason why I need to bring this forth, because last video I spoke to, and as it says in chapter 10, these people were scattered and they each had their own language. And then chapter 11 comes forward and says these words, "Now the whole world had one language." And you're thinking to yourself, it's contradicting itself here, but it's contradicting itself if you take it in a chronological space of how the chapters go. And so as we get to see this before chapter 10, we get to see the spreading out of nations, the table of nations from Noah, Shem, Japheth, and Ham, and being able to see how those are spread out after the Tower of Babel. And so we get to see God at work. I just want to put that right up front. God at work. Yes, there's frustration in this work, not in God's work, but in man's work. And what man has become after the flood. Again, that cyclical pattern of being able to just take a look at ourselves, disobedient to God's call, not walking in God's commands. But when there's time and space in between these commands, when there's time and space, when we're not listening to the Lord, almost always it just reflects inward upon us. That's our nature. That's natural for us to think of ourselves or think of our clan and being able to make it the best rather than heed the Lord's command and being able to see his direction. It's natural for us to just turn inward, to turn selfish. And that's what we get to see in chapter 11, as we get to see that famous, narrative in Sunday school, the Tower of Babel. And just so that you're aware, when we get to that word, I'll explain it now so that it won't get caught then. Babel, in the Hebrew, it actually sounds like the word for confused. And so it's actually, and this is crucial for Old Testament history here, it's actually Babylon. Babylon's going to be, later into the years of being able to see Nebuchadnezzar and the kings and the overtaking of Israel in 586 BC. As we have that history, we have it right up front here, Genesis chapter 11. Here's these people that went eastward, right, settled in this plain of Shinar, which is Babylon. But really, the word for Babel meaning confused, because God confused our language there. Let's read together. Genesis chapter 11. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. And they said to each other, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone, because stone wasn't necessarily prevalent there, and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Hopefully you saw a lot of those pronouns there of being able to say we, ourselves, we, ourselves. They were trying to make a name for ourselves, right? And so I just love this, and it was brought forth in my footnotes if you have those study Bibles as well. But it pushes you back to Genesis chapter 6. And the people, the Nephilim, who were men of renown or men of name. Name was so important. It's not just identity markers. It's actually, name was this pride. Name was this self. Name was this honor. And so really what they're achieving here, going for here, is to be recognized, to have everything be looked towards them, right? So that we make a name for ourselves and people would come to us rather than us going to them and not be scattered throughout the world. However, verse 5, it says, "But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the men were building. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. If they're coming together and plotting this plan out of one language and one clan and making, and what are they using that for? Selfishness. What are they using that for? To make a name for themselves, to make their own kingdom. And nothing's going to be impossible for them to be able to actually build up this kingdom and not heed the commands of the kingdom of God. And so God is at work. He comes down, sees it, sees their sin, sees their selfishness, sees what they're doing for their own kingdom, and needs to establish his. And so come, verse 7 says, come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. God's plans aren't our plans. As I get to see here, what was their plan was to build their own kingdom and have this people of renown and people of the name. But God's plan for his people were they'd actually honor and actually point to his name. And so as we get to see here, as they were building up this kingdom, they wanted to do it so they could just stay in one place and people would come to them. But the reality towards what God is doing with his people is planting them in a place so that they can go to the nations, scatter through the world, of being able to profess and live under the name of who the Lord is, the one true God. And so as we pick up that and have that narrative just set before us, have that reality and that kingdom set before us of what God wanted to establish, the reality to it is he is going to establish that. And that's where we get to see the rest of our narrative going, as it gets to be this turning point of, yes, there's a bunch of names coming, and being able to read through these in Genesis chapter 11, but it's setting up the stage for God's people to be to the nations. And who are those nations? Well, we get to see it's going to actually be pointed of going out into the east and being able to point towards the father of the nations, his name meaning father, Abraham. So here we go from the genealogy here, kind of putting this forth, that narrative, that time where we're going to be pushing towards the kingdom and the narrative of God rather than the kingdom and the narrative of humanity. So this is the account of Shem. 2 years after the flood, when Shem was 100 years old, he became the father of Arphaxad. And after he became the father of Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and had other sons and daughters. When Arphaxad had lived 35 years, he became the father of Shelah. And after he became the father of Shelah, Arphaxad lived 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Shelah had lived 30 years, he became the father of Eber. And after he became the father of Eber, Shelah lived 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Eber had lived 34 years, he became the father of Peleg. And after he became the father of Peleg, Eber lived 430 years and had other sons and daughters. When Peleg had lived 30 years, he became the father of Reu. And after he became the father of Reu, Peleg lived 209 years and had other sons and daughters. When Reu had lived 32 years, he became the father of Serug. And after he became the father of Serug, Reu lived 207 years and had other sons and daughters. When Serug had lived 30 years, he became the father of Nahor. And after he became the father of Nahor, Serug lived 200 years. You get to see a little bit of the continual years. It's like, whoa, 500 years, 403, 430, all of a sudden 207. What happened? Oh, 200, and then 119. You get to see the lessening of years after the flood and the effect of sin multiplying and bringing about death earlier. So when Serug had lived 30 years, he became the father of Nahor, and after he became the father of Nahor, verse 22:3, Serug lived 200 years and had other sons and daughters. When Nahor had lived 29 years, he became the father of Terah. And after he became the father of Terah, Nahor lived 119 years and had other sons and daughters. After Terah had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And this is the count of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran became the father of Lot. While his father Terah was still alive, Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans, in the land of his birth. Abram and Nahor both married. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of both Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was barren. She had no children. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Terah lived 205 years, and he died in Haran. The narrative is set up. And if you know the narrative of this Old Testament in Genesis, then you're going to leap forward. Abram. The bigger part about Abram is here's these people trying to build a kingdom and a way for themselves, and God interrupts because he has a kingdom and a way that he is going to build and expand. And he's going to use the father of the nations, Abram, a covenant with his people to be able to bring forth his community, his kingdom, in his ways. I pray that you can pause this day in Genesis chapter 11 and not get sidetracked with the names and the years and even the confusion of the Tower of Babel, but rather get to see it pointed and simple. God's ways are best. His kingdom prevails. And so this day we walk in his ways, and we are about the ways of his kingdom. I pray that you have a blessed day living in that kingdom and walking in the ways and the will of our God. Take care.